Okay, so it's now July. I sold my 2013 F-150 around January 16th of 25. I don't really remember the exact date. Um, but this is just a video kind of go through all the issues I've had, what I liked about the truck, what I didn't, and kind of why I sold. So 2013 F-150 FX4. FX4 at that time was its own grade level. It wasn't like a normal package that you can get now for the 500, 800 bucks, whatever it is. It was a whole trim line and it kind of sat below the Lariat. So I bought this back in March of 2016. I traded in a Jeep Wrangler JKU that I had that was pretty heavily modified. So I purchased it for 33,600. It had 43,000 miles on it. I sold it with 256,000, and so I put about 213,000 miles on it in that time frame. Like I said, so I bought it from CarMax used, 33,600, and I thought I got a pretty decent deal. So it's a four-door crew cab, short bed. It had a drop-in bed liner that I later removed and sold. Same with the side steps. I ended up selling those. We'll get to that later. What I bought the truck for was to take the motorcycle and my car at the time, and the car at the time, my Focus ST, to the track. The Jeep, you can't really tow with that at all. And we were doing more track days, and we're using borrowed trucks, so decided that this was the way to go. Helped my brother move 3 times with it. I've moved 4 times with it or so over the years. We did a lot of road tripping, especially on the West Coast, all across Nevada, Oregon, Washington, California, Idaho, Nevada, Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas. So yeah, we use it for a lot of long distance traveling, camping. We had the side-by-side, my YXZ, and the trailer for that, and so we towed that across the country as well. So that's what we used the truck for. I enjoyed it. I liked the truck. It did have its issues that we can kind of start going through now. The biggest major repairs that we had were the coolant leaks at the turbos. Those are really common with the Gen 1 Ecoboosts. This one in particular was about 3,200, and these are going to be kind of estimates off the top of my head. I didn't quite remember exactly what it cost, but this was about at 120-ish thousand miles. After that, I know I did the ball joints back in 2019, and that was $233 for the ball joints. I did the work myself, borrowed the tools from AutoZone. Nothing too crazy with those. More recently, in October of 23, I replaced upper control arms, lower control arms. I have a whole video on that. All the parts for that were $1,600. And then shortly after all of this, before the transmission recall, I had a shop do the brake fluid, coolant, the trans fluid, and the diffs. Reason for that is around 115,000 miles. I didn't want to wait to the 150. I'm kind of glad I did, because I think whatever issues the trans could have had forced the transmission lead to dirty or go out. And it was honestly a couple hundred miles out of the extended warranty period for that recall. So it was at like 149.9, and then the truck was towed from my house to a shop, about an hour and a half away, and I had no truck for about a month. It was mid-pandemic, and there was no parts, and so I don't blame Ford for that, but that is what it is. But that was replaced for free, so we can kind of go back up here. So I did the ball joints. 4 years later, redid the whole front end again. The brake fluid, coolant, trans, and diffs, so it was about $600. So I would call this all the major repairs. The only time that the truck really left me stranded was with this trans recall. I did have the fuel pump relay go out, and I actually forgot to put that in here. That was about a $50 part. That went out about 200-some thousand miles. I have a video on that if you want to try to find that. Then I kind of categorized upgrades. These rear shocks, not really an upgrade, but I just did Bilsteins. I did airbags. So when we were towing, I towed my brother's Bronco, and I knew the rear end was going to sag because when I towed my car, I'd be on the freeway and my headlights in the truck would be in the mirrors of semis and they would flash me. So I figured I'd get airbags to help, just make it level again. And honestly, that was a really good purchase. I don't remember how much they were, but I checked today, and at some point they're about $310. So I had those airbags in the back. I will say I did also put in some limiting straps just because I've aired up the airbags. And if you go off-roading with the airbags, aired up or not aired up, if you droop on one side, you'll end up ripping the bolt out of the bottom of them. And so you end up just ruining an entire airbag set. So I did have limiting straps as well. And so the thing was, if you could air up the airbag over 50 pounds, it would stretch the limiting strap to its end. So you would have no suspension travel up or down. And yeah, that's just a good way to blow out your back there. Okay, so I had a green filter. I had that in for a really long time. I ended up throwing it away when I went back to a normal paper filter after like 150,000 miles with it. There was nothing really wrong with it. I just got tired of dealing with the oil and purchasing the oil and cleaning it. And at that point, I wasn't towing nearly as much, and we weren't doing the long kind of road trips. So I just decided to go with something easier to maintain. So these are Addictive Desert Design, so ADD, Honey Badger side steps, and normally they're like $1,400. I dented the stock ones off-roading, so I sold those, and I was looking online, and Amazon had the ADDs for $300, and they weren't 100% my favorite style, but for something that I knew I could buy, and if I really didn't like, I could resell for more money. So I just purchased them, and I had them for 5 or 6 years on the truck. The window tint, so I did, when I got the truck, the rear windows were tinted, but they removed the fronts. So I did just the front and the brow. I think that was about $350. And then the tonneau cover, I got an Amazon knockoff, $150. So I think this is the full total of like what I would consider upgrades. Okay, so now these are just kind of estimated repair costs. So for the oil changes, let me see, I got a formula in here. So I did 210,000 miles. Roughly every 7,000 miles I did an oil change, and I think roughly it cost me $40 each time. Realistically, I think it cost a little less than that, but I know for a fact I had a shop do a oil change once or twice. So I think that's a pretty fair price for that. And I've only ran essentially these kind of sets of tires. So I have Continental ATs. I went through 2 sets of those. Those are my tires I recommend for what we were doing. They last about 60,000 miles each. So I've had 2 sets of those, and that lasts maybe 100,000 miles on the truck. And on the second set, I sold it on the truck, and those had maybe about 20,000 miles left on them. I had the Ironman ATs. That's actually what they came with, and those every 20,000 miles or so they'd wear out. So I'd end up getting a new one every 20,000 miles, and those are at the time were like $450 a set. So I didn't even bat an eye at those. I tried one set of the MTs and hated them. They wore funny. They sounded terrible. They ended up chunking. I just wasn't a fan. So I went back to the ATs. ATs, if you're in a bind and you just need a good set of E-rated tires, you really can't beat their price. They're really, really good. So next, spark plugs. I did do a set of spark plugs on it. At first, I was pulling the plugs, gapping them every 20,000 miles. and that seemed to help. You always find the problem cylinder that would be out of spec, and so just going through and making sure and just regapping them every 20,000 miles seemed to help them last a good amount of time, and plus you can see if there's any damage. So that's what I did with the spark plugs. Brake pads, I went through and did just the front brake pads once in 2021. This is another set of rear shocks in 22, so I replaced these before I did the whole front end. That was the air filter in 23, so this is when I replaced the green filter. So I bought a transmission mount that I did replace in April 23. That transmission mount was completely collapsed, and so when the truck was just off idle, you would hear the transmission knock against the frame. I bought engine mounts at the same time, so I bought these together in a kit. I never installed these, so I actually have these in a storage somewhere. The rear diff fluid, I did 190,000 miles. Like I said, it was replaced before by a shop, but I did it, I think it was 190,000. I have a video on it somewhere. I think it's $55 for fluid. So I bought trans fluid, didn't do the transmission, only did the transfer case. Same thing with the filter. Bought the filter, never used it. I gave it to the new owner. There might be some stuff I haven't listed, so I put $1,000 in there just in case. I went through 2 batteries. They're like $200 to $300 a piece, so roughly $500. Then I did the 3M headlight restoration kit, and I replaced the stock HIDs. This is about 220,000 miles, and that made a huge difference. So those HIDs were so dim by that point, I thought my eyes were going bad, and it was just the bulbs were bad. So I recommend replacing those. So in total repairs of just this estimated cost plus the major repairs up here, that's about $14,000. And then with the purchase of the truck, it's just under 50 grand. So that's not including any type of gas, registration, anything like that. So I had the truck for about 213,000 miles. The total cost was this 49. So if you divide those out, you get 23 cents per mile. Cost per year, if you just divide it out. So I owned it for about 8.81 years. Divided out about 5,600 a year. And I drove it about 24,000 miles a year. So that's the cost and kind of what the truck went through. The final kind of reason that we decided to sell it was we needed something a little more reliable. This last Christmas when we did our trip cross country again, it started to have issues kind of hesitating on throttle at freeway speeds. I went to go past the semi, gave it the beans, and it started knocking and the check engine light came on, and I had a semi come right up to my rear bumper, flashing his lights, hitting his horn, and there wasn't anything I could do about it. So I kind of limped it past the next semi and got over. The truck cleared up, ran just fine after that. I kind of, realized that if I dropped a couple gears before, it would be fine. So I just didn't like to be in the high boost, high load situations. I went through trying to spot check everything, couldn't really figure out what happened, and I wasn't in the position to pull the truck apart to try to, find a roadside fix. So we did our trip and then made it back home. And at that point, I knew I needed engine mounts. I knew the transmission needed to be gone through. I wasn't sure if it was missing, burnt valve or something starting to flare up. And it's one of those things where I'm like, is the turbo starting to go? And I just decided, the truck's not worth very much at this point. And ultimately, if I spend $5,000 or $6,000 going through making everything solid, there's everything else on the truck that's gonna go wrong with it. U-joints, bearings, all the little things that you don't really think about day to day. And we needed an actual new reliable vehicle, and so that's what we went with. So that's why we sold the truck. Now, would I buy this truck again, and do I believe the Ecoboost is a good motor? Yes. For that being a Gen 1, um, it was an absolute beast. I mean, like, if anyone's driven up Donner, I've towed a Ford Focus on a trailer up Donner at 99 miles an hour, and sitting in sixth gear, just chugging along at is just under 3,000 RPM. So it will just pull like a freight train whenever you need it to. I've jumped it a handful of times off road. Yeah, I wasn't the nicest to this truck, and it just handled it. Uh, but yeah, so I guess this is what it was like having it for that amount of time, and kind of what I went through. If you have any questions, you can always leave a comment. Thank you.